All right, quick one this morning. Bump stops in Tvan and upper shock pin failure. Before we have a look at the Tvan, we're going to have a quick look at this little box trailer behind me. I'll turn this camera around. This was a project that was awarded under tender to Track. It was a supply of, I don't know the number, it's a couple of hundred, maybe less, general utility trailers for the RAF. These weren't, as far as I'm aware, supplied to Army at all. They were all RAF. This one recently refurbished. Really neat little trailer, obviously on MC2. If we have a look underneath, you should be familiar, at least if you're familiar with Tvan, with this suspension system. So pretty much what you expect to see under your van. Couple of minor variations. Limit straps were standard for these first MC2 equipped trailers. The other thing that I wanted to point out, is the reason we're here, is these bump stops, which are not currently installed. I'll explain why shortly. But they essentially go here. They were a solid rubber bump stop. They were genuine Land Rover. When you turned them over, they had Land Rover written on them. Unfortunately, we've misplaced them, and the guy that knows where they are, well, he's still in bed. So we'll find them, we'll refit them. But important to note, they were solid rubber. Dimensionally a little bit wider, but they looked very similar. We'll go over to a Tvan now, and we'll have a look at the bump stop that most of you are familiar with. That's the chassis mounted bump stop there. And when it's not compressed, I've jacked that up, they look something like this. You can see they look like extruded rubber. Obviously, an alternative to genuine Land Rover, these would have been far more cost effective. So good reason to change out. I've jacked this van up, or at least the asymmetric arm up, underneath the axle, but it's still on its pin stance. There's very little weight of the van on the bump stop at the moment. I've done this to illustrate a point, and that is that the shock absorber, we've fully compressed it, won't go on that upper shock pin. It's on the lower, it won't go on the upper, and that's because the shock absorber is completely bottomed out, but the suspension is allowed to cycle past the point at which we see that shock absorber in a solid state. And so as a result, the upper shock mount unfortunately fails. Now, it's commonly misunderstood that these shock absorber mounts, I should say, are all faulty. The welding did something to the materials didn't meet the spec. It's really not the case. So far, I've not actually seen an upper shock mount fail as a result of manufacturing defect. They've all been a result of a heavy bump, and we know this van, like many, has experienced quite a few heavy bumps, because if you have a look down there, you can see that chassis mount for the asymmetric arm on the other side is bent in a little half moon shape, and that's what we would commonly expect to see. Now, this leads further. Of course, it leads to asymmetric link bending. It can possibly lead to stub axle bending and stub axle failure. But you'll know this has occurred because the next thing that occurs directly after this is the coil spring falls out, and then the van lurches right over. It's sitting on the chassis there, or on its bump stop, and it can do quite a lot of damage. This van's actually here for damage to this section of the van, but on the other side, the coil spring came out, got jammed in, damaged the body before it physically fell out. So, you know, from my experience, the issue is not these upper shock mounts. The issue is these bump stops. So we have a solution. Track has a solution, actually. Track for some time has been installing inner spring bump stops. This is a genuine Track one, and you can see a really effective measure. This goes inside the coil spring, and so for those primarily with 1.8 tonne vans, this will be standard in your van. Track actually sold it as a 33-inch bump stop. We just regard it as a bump stop. This one is manufactured for Topaz, but they're very much the same for Tvan if you buy them from us. HDPE upper, used to be nylon, they're now HDPE. We use a spring assister / bump stop, really effective bump stop, but they are designed to take a lot of load, decelerate the axle before they get to a bump stop condition. And we do that not because we think the track one's inadequate. It works absolutely fine. The problem we experience is people's travel speeds are particularly high now, especially with 200 and 300 series and Y62, these V6, utes. They are able to travel at much higher speeds. The suspension systems are much better, and so Tvan on the original design taking, unfortunately having to take a lot more than they were designed or were intended to be used as. So as a result, we've decided to go with that spring assister. I think that's a bulk of what I wanted to convey. Really, it's up to you, the owner, now to ensure that your van, both ride height is correct. Ride height is another really big contributing factor to this shock pin failure. Many vans that we see are low, too much camber, incorrect ride height, and so that's easy to address. Obviously, you just need to install the most appropriate spring for the vehicle's weight, but also make sure you've got an appropriate bump stop installed. At some stage, we'll talk about limit straps. I don't regard them as necessary if you're using the Coney or the Tenneco shock absorber. They're a nice addition. There is a reason why they were in the original MC2 configuration. That's something we'll cover in another video. All right, thank you.